Okay, here we are starting with Chapter 7, uh, Jeffersonian America, or the Jeffersonian era in American history. That's going to take us through his presidency from 1800 to 1808, and then a little bit after that through the War of 1812. So about 1800 to 1814, the beginning of the 19th century in America, and kind of some of the stuff that happens with that. So remember, your Chapter 7 packet will be due on Friday. And we'll have a quiz on Friday over Chapter 7, which is going to be another one with, it's not going to be a 10-question quiz as normal. It's going to be kind of a 2-question one, but they're going to be extended answer questions similar to the type of ones you're going to see on the AP exam. Not essays, but just kind of the free response questions. So not the long essay question that you did last week or the week before. But instead the free response question. So anyway, what we're going to cover in this chapter primarily are the major events of Jefferson's presidency, the Louisiana Purchase and the Embargo Act. Then we'll talk a little bit about the transfer of power from him to James Madison, and finish off talking a little bit about the War of 1812, a relatively insignificant conflict that saw the United States face off against Great Britain in conflict for a second time, with very similar results to the first conflict. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, so Thomas Jefferson becomes president. So where are we here? So what do we already know? Well, just to review, America has gone from this period, this set of colonies, 13 colonies, loosely tied colonies, to going to war with Great Britain and declaring their independence, somehow winning that conflict, coming together a little bit as a nation, and then becoming a nation. Early on in our national times, we're under the Articles of Confederation. Of course, that turns out to be a little less than successful. So we switch to a different system. When they come together and make the Great Compromise, we switch to a new system under the Constitution, which is the present system we've been operating under since 1789. This includes, of course, later the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, the separation of powers, and a federal executive, i.e. President of the United States, beginning with George Washington and then John Adams. And here we are now with Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States. Jefferson had been the vice president under John Adams, even though they were from opposing parties. That's just kind of how things worked in the first few elections until 1804. It was the winner of the election gets the presidency, and the runner-up basically gets the vice presidency. This changes in 1800, where you have kind of two candidates for a party, but they vote again at the end, and you determine who's going to be the next president based on that. So it's not like today where they run together, like Biden and Harris or Trump and Pence. It's like they're both running for the same party, and then there's guys running on the opposite side. This didn't last very long. There's guys running on the opposite side, and basically you see who wins, and then you vote again, and the one that gets the most votes the second time becomes president, and the one who gets the second most becomes vice president. Basically, that's the best way I can explain it. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and that's why it changed in 1804. So anyway, so after losing the election in 1800, things do not go particularly well for John Adams. John Adams could be a very spiteful guy, and by the end of his presidency, he's not liked by his own party, the Federalists, nor is he liked, obviously, by the opposition party, the Jeffersonian Republicans / Anti-Federalist / Democratic Republicans. So, Adams is just kind of just there at the end, kind of in an angry, bitter tone, because him losing this election is really bad for the Federalist Party. As important as the Federalist Party was to the creation of the United States of America and what it was. Many of the ideologies put together in the Constitution, pretty much entirely in the Constitution, are Federalist ideologies. But Adams does one really important thing right before he leaves office. With the Federalist Party kind of fleeting a little bit, Adams goes ahead and makes all these judicial appointments. Okay, something that would become known as the Midnight Judges. Basically appoints all these Federalist judges onto the courts to kind of make Federalist-based decisions. The Federalist Party is about to die, but of course, as we know, judicial appointments are appointments that last a lifetime. So federalism will survive on the courts. It's not going to survive, as a political party, but it's going to be around on the courts really for another 30 years. Okay, like I said, the Federalist Party's in trouble. When Adams leaves, it was a long trip back to Massachusetts. He doesn't wait. The custom would be to greet the new president as they're coming into the office, as they're coming into the White House, which was just called the Executive Mansion back then, but you greet the new president and show him around, whatever. Adams kind of just left because it was like a month-long trip by carriage back up to Massachusetts. He left a note that said the White House stables, needed to be cleaned, basically, and didn't stay or wait for Jefferson to arrive. So he kind of left in kind of a bitter fashion, unhappy with the way his presidency turned out, and unhappy where now he's this man kind of without a political party. Thomas Jefferson's ascension to the presidency is kind of referred to as the Revolution of 1800. Jefferson calls it a revolution as great as the one that started in 1776, meaning the American Revolution. Meaning, again, his party, the Democratic Republicans, his party is going to be a champion for the common man, be a champion for less power of the federal government. So this, again, champion for the common man and decentralized government. That is going to be what the Democratic Republican Party is going to represent, and we're representative of all Americans through that, right? Common men, decentralizing government, et cetera, et cetera. Like I said before, the Federalist Party is going to weaken as a result of the Adams presidency. A lot of people turn against the Federalists. There's a lot of division within the party. There's the people that kind of supported Adams. There weren't many, and the folks that supported Alexander Hamilton. Unfortunately, Hamilton wasn't eligible to be president because he wasn't born in the U.S., so that really wasn't going to go anywhere. But the great thing about the Revolution of 1800 is Jefferson, in his inaugural address, says something to unite the people, because that is what a president is supposed to do. This is what George Washington did. This is what John Adams really didn't do very well. But in his inaugural address, Jefferson makes the statement, we are all Federalists. We are all Republicans. Okay? That is a message of unity, saying that we're going to be representative of all people in this country, even if we have different political ideologies, right? Compare, words like that with what we hear today, where there's so much division and dislike. You can see where these founding fathers really were such great and unique leaders. And in support of that, when Jefferson becomes president, he really comes to many of the Federalist policies and doesn't do much to change them, right? Now, remember all that bitterness that existed between the Anti-Federalists and the Federalists, which of course are now the Democratic Republicans, the Anti-Federalists are, and all the and all the problems that created. You would think that the first thing that Jefferson would do would get rid of any Federalist policy that exists. But instead, he doesn't do that. In fact, he left many many of the same policies that had existed before, Federalist policies, intact. Okay, left them around. Why do this? Because you want to promote the unity that you're trying to create for the country, right? And Jefferson believes in this. And he says, really, some of these policies really aren't that bad. Really aren't that bad, okay? So let's keep them. Let's keep the national bank. Let's keep a national debt, because I kind of understand now why a national debt could be a good thing. This is really important, again, for a president to be able to do. We got two of the first three guys make it onto Mount Rushmore, right? Washington and Jefferson. I hope you can kind of see why, right? Their decision making, their ideas, their willingness to look at America not as a country divided by party, but instead one that is united under one flag, under a bigger ideology, right? Maybe aspiring to be that shining city upon a hill. So that was kind of what he does with that. He also comes up with new policies. New policies include, in terms of federal revenue, customs duties, in other words, tariffs, and sale of land. Land sale are the only forms of revenue for the federal government, okay? Customs duties and land sale. Customs duties, again, are the same things as tariff. Selling land and tariffs or customs duties are the only ways that the federal government can bring in revenue. Jefferson also cuts government spending significantly. It was already small. He cuts government spending to a really, really tiny amount, okay? And when you do that, you're also going to have to make sacrifices in other places, right? And that's where the military. The size of our military when Jefferson became president was a whopping 4,000 men in the Army. He cut that to 2,500 men. Our Navy had a total of 25 ships in it when Jefferson became president. Jefferson cuts that to 7 ships. We don't even have a full fleet early on here. So Jefferson's not a big military guy, not big on government spending, limits some of those things, but also keeps a lot of ideas in place, which is really important too. Okay. The big tax that we got rid of is that whiskey tax. Why get rid of that? Because it's already caused problems. It's already caused dissent. Caused the whiskey rebellion. That didn't go well. We have to get rid of the things that aren't working in this country. That's one of the things he looks at this way. All right, so now we're going to talk early on here about some of the Supreme Court cases that really shaped America. And the first one to really do so is Marbury versus Madison. Marbury versus Madison was an 1803 Supreme Court case and deals with the concept of judicial review. Okay, in other words, increasing the power of the judicial branch. Now, let's go over a little bit more specifically, because this is probably the first really, really important Supreme Court decision. 1803 Marbury versus Madison. What is the issue in question? What are the powers of the Supreme Court? That is the question being asked in Marbury versus Madison. The answer, or the decision by John Marshall, is that the Supreme Court has the power to declare laws and other acts of Congress and the President unconstitutional. This is a process known as judicial review. This gives the Supreme Court enormous power. This is a really, really big moment for our country. So John Marshall is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He also happens to be a Federalist, as are several members of the Supreme Court and the lower courts as well. So having a lot of Federalists around there is going to be really important for the existence of Federalist ideologies moving forward. Okay, expanding the power of the federal government is exactly what this does. The framers of the Constitution never intended the judicial branch to have as much power as the executive or legislative branches. However, Marshall's decision actually says that this gives the Supreme Court a huge or enormous amount of power, okay, equal to that of the other two. Remember, it is the job of the judicial branch to interpret the law. In other words, when members of the court sit down and look at cases and look at laws, they say, what is the precedent for this case? What do I have to look at to determine the legality of a particular law? In other words, the legislative branch makes the laws, the executive branch makes sure that the laws are followed, basically, they enforces the laws, and the judicial branch tells us what the laws mean. They interpret it. And some laws can be interpreted in different ways, which is up to the Supreme Court to do that, which gives them a ton of power. And at the end of the day, this strengthens the power of the federal government at the expense of the states, because now the federal government has more power to tell people what laws are, to strike down state laws as unconstitutional, etc., giving the federal government a tremendous amount of power. All right, so hopefully that makes sense, and we'll move forward. All right. So two big things happen in the presidency of Thomas Jefferson. One of them you probably know quite a bit about. The other one, probably not as much. And of course, the one that you probably know a lot about is Louisiana Purchase, right? So how does the Louisiana Purchase happen? Napoleon, of course, is over in France. And Napoleon has a vision for conquering the world. And part of that includes having influence over in North America. So Napoleon wants to build, an empire in North America. He had tried to do it in many other places. In Egypt, where he was successful, he tried to invade India. That didn't work out so well. So now Napoleon is focusing on creating a great French empire in North America, in the Americas. And the place he wants to do it is the land that the French had once occupied, the Louisiana territory, which now belongs to Spain. Okay? Now, the situation here is Napoleon is in wars with lots of people in Europe. And one of his big allies, and one of the places he had basically conquered, more or less, is Spain. So now the question is all the territory that Spain controls now belong to him? And that's kind of an iffy question. Spain comes to a deal with Napoleon to give him back control of New Orleans, or the port down there, which alarms America a little bit. But ultimately, we go and what we normally do, use diplomacy to come up with a good deal to make something happen. So what happens? Again, it's a little bit of luck on our side. Okay? So Napoleon, who is focused really on wars in Europe, is having a problem with some of the islands that France controls in the Caribbean. And there's a major insurrection in one of them. And he has to spend resources on sending troops over to kind of put down this rebellion, which is harder than he thought it would be. They eventually crushed the rebellion, but it was kind of difficult. So we have two of our ambassadors, two of our leaders over there, James Monroe, who would later be president, and Robert Livingston, who sees on the opportunity. Okay, Monroe and Livingston realized that Napoleon's really focused on some other things. They were sent over there by Jefferson to purchase New Orleans. They're just supposed to purchase New Orleans, but then they come up with a suggestion that hey, how about you just sell us the whole Louisiana territory, and then you don't have to worry about it. Napoleon has a massive ego. Napoleon probably, and this is me making this up, Napoleon probably thinks that, yeah, well, I can sell it to them now, I can make money, and then later I can go fulfill my dream and take over America and build my empire there anyway. So yeah, why don't we sell it? Why don't I get some more money to pay for my wars, my military campaigns in Europe that are going to be coming up in the next year? So yeah, why don't we go ahead and sell that? And basically Monroe and Livingston, without the consent of Jefferson, and that's going to be a problem later, without the consent of Jefferson, are going to go ahead and get the Louisiana territory. Okay? Now, the raw data of the Louisiana Purchase is pretty impressive. Okay? We bought it for a total of $15 million. which by today's terms doesn't seem like a lot of money. But even by today's terms, it's still really not a lot of money. In 1803 money, the Louisiana Purchase would be about $230 million today. Still not a lot considering the amount of land that we got. That amounts to about 3 cents an acre, or what would be about 12 cents an acre today, and about $18.29 per square mile. Okay, imagine today being able to buy a square mile of land for less than $20, right? Buy an acre of land for 12 cents, right? Buy half a country for $230 million. We get all this for $15 million, and we effectively double the size of the United States. Now, for Jefferson, this causes a big problem, actually. Jefferson looks at the Louisiana Purchase and says, I don't know if I have the power to do this or not. Okay? There is nothing in the Constitution that says anything about expanding territory, adding land, anything like that. Did I act within the rights of the Constitution to accept this deal from the French? So Jefferson, who is somebody who is more of a states' rights guy, more of a smaller government guy, says, I don't know if I overstepped my bounds here. He's actually very upset with Monroe and Livingston for making this purchase without his consent. But at the end of the day, Jefferson decides to go ahead and go with it because who does it help out? The people that Jefferson cares about the most. The common man, the backcountry farmer, the people in the middle of nowhere that want opportunity and representation and having access to land and the opportunity to move and better your life and things like that, or things that Thomas Jefferson really, really believes in. Okay, and in allowing for that, Jefferson, goes ahead and says, yeah, I guess we'll go ahead and accept the purchase, right? He sends Lewis and Clark from 1804 to 1806 to examine the territory. They discover a lot more than they ever thought they would. They make it all the way to the Pacific Ocean. They discover lands that are filled with mountains and prairies and wildlife that they hadn't seen and rivers that they didn't know and all kinds of new and different resources. Okay, they came back and reported to Jefferson on what they had found, and they said, everything. And Jefferson proclaimed that it would take 1,000 years to settle this territory, 1,000 years to settle this land. We did it in 40 years. Okay, so again, a few little questions really quick here. So who cries out when the New Orleans is closed, and why is Jefferson sensitive to them? Who are those people? Why is the territory so important? And why is Thomas Jefferson so conflicted about the Louisiana Purchase? I want you to answer those questions and shoot me a quick email by tomorrow, by late tomorrow, that that you did indeed watch this video and got these questions. So anyway, we'll take a quick look at a map here. So look at how much territory we get. And through rivers, we actually have access to, to the Pacific Ocean now too. But we double the size of the United States through the Louisiana Purchase. So this is a massive, massive increase in territory, and it's going to change the trajectory in the future of the United States. All right, so that's all for today, and I will hopefully have another video for you tomorrow. Thanks a lot.